Nicole Marie, your transformation catalyst and coach, and this is Know Your Archetype series where we are diving deeper into the archetypes that exist within you. And this is the video for Gemini. So Gemini rules the third house and is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is the planet of communication and is how we learn to communicate, not only by speaking but by listening. It's also the house where we create our social network, our friends and siblings. So why is that important to understand about Gemini? For Gemini, it's how we are developed in our speaking, communication, how we listen, because Gemini archetype is the Fool. So we talked a little bit about the Fool concept in the Hero, because in the major arcana in Tarot, the Fool begins the journey. Or the Fool is kind of like the center point, and then the rest kind of evolves around how he learns to develop the self. So the Fool's kind of like the baby. It's like when you come out and you're curious about life. You don't really understand everything, so that's why you're curious. You want to understand, you want to learn, you want to communicate, you want to listen, you want to hear, you want to ask why. The why is a huge part of this archetype because it is constantly curious to discover more information. Now it's different from Aries that kind of wants to know more about the truth, and similar to Sag, which is all about focusing, I must know the ultimate truth. But Gemini is, I want to know about facts, and then those facts are going to lead me to these facts, and then that fact might lead me to a whole other world. And that's ultimately what the Fool does. The Fool is incredibly intuitive, connected to the higher mind, and is really into synchronicity. It's like, let me follow this thread. Let me follow this impulse that I'm feeling, or again, following my curiosity down the road. Ooh, there's a butterfly. Ooh, where does the butterfly go? Ooh, there's a rabbit. So it's this constant just curiosity. And because it's connected to the planet Mercury, Mercury is also known as how we communicate with the gods. So gods and goddesses, the higher mind, however you want to perceive this. It's how do you connect with the greater concept of life. So this is how we actually get to work with the archetypes, because in a lot of ways you can look at archetypes as these characters in our life, and when we call in Mercury to help build that communication and that relationship, Mercury can kind of be like the, the coach, like, okay, or, the counselor. This is what the God told you to do. And you're like, yeah, well, I don't want to do it. Why don't you want to do it? So it's like, it's helping us translate messages. It's helping us kind of be a trickster. That's the best quality of Fool, is that you can shapeshift. You can, by going on this quest of never really knowing of like the ultimate end, you're always questioning, well, is that true? For that person, is that true? And so this curiosity helps you be an incredible scientist, an inventor. Like there's all of these different ways to use this archetype in your life, especially when you're doing research, when you're wanting to write papers. It's used for communication. And it's also a lot to do with like the social network that you belong to. Gemini's, the Fool likes to be considered like duality. It's how can I see the other side of this perspective? Because I'm not attached to either. I'm just seeing the sides, and I can know the sides. I can be dark, I can be light, but ultimately I'm everything. And that is the Gemini and Fool archetype. So that is the light aspect, is full of curiosity, wanting to investigate, to be curious. And the shadow of that, what would be the shadow? Well, if we're looking at the Fool, a lot of times, we're not wanting to be foolish or made fun of or all these things when we're children. So the Fool's very childlike, right? That's why it maintains the curiosity. But when the child becomes wounded, that's when the shadow is born. So a wounded child is one that has stopped its curiosity and how we perceive life through this way of, that was painful, so I'm not going to go there. That person's too dark or I'm not going to go there. Or I'm not going to allow myself to feel those feelings because I've been punished before. So the wounded child is the shadow of the Fool, where it stops itself. It limits itself because it doesn't feel safe in the world. It doesn't feel safe to explore and to investigate because maybe the environment doesn't really allow that. A lot of people grow up in very, patriarchal families and things have to be this way and you have to believe those things, or they grow up in religious, really strong cultural inhibition. So, you're kind of stuck with the same modality and it limits that childlike innocence of the Fool. So the wounded child, which, we all have this aspect in ourselves where we feel like we don't belong, that people reject us and we're wrong, or we say the wrong thing, or we feel vulnerable after we speak. We've all kind of had a wound in our life. And I'll get into that on another aspect, but we all have a wound. And it's how we deal with this wound. So if we hold our breath, say, I am the victim to this, or I cannot heal this pain, then the wounded child wins. But what can we do with the Fool, which is, what? There is a purpose to this pain. I'm curious to investigate why I chose this pain. What is it that I can learn from it? How can I be a bigger shapeshifter archetype? How can I find the curiosity again? How can I find my childlike innocence? And that's on another spectrum of looking at these archetypes is, who is the protector? And the Fool also protects because it allows itself not to be as attached to an outcome. That when you're dealing with the, pain of a wounded child and you're stuck in that pattern, you have all these other archetypes you're able to access. But the one that's going to relate the best to the wounded child is the Fool, because it still remembers its connection to its divine center, where it is not wounded. There's a part in us, which, however you want to call it, I call it the soul, that cannot be harmed. No words, no action, no anything can actually cause harm to the soul. So this is, if you look at nature as a symbol of this, we cut down all these trees from certain part of the trunk. But what lives underneath? The roots. And the roots still grow. Even though it doesn't have the branches and this beautiful life and body, the roots continue to grow because it is being nourished by the entire root system. So this is the soul in which I speak of, that no matter what the upper world or society or all these things have done to the wounded child, the soul still is maintained. And the Fool's kind of the protector of that, because it protects it by always being in the movement, by shape shifting and being the trickster of seeing, ooh, that was scary. How can I find a new way of perceiving this energy? And again, why it's in the third house, it's like we get support from our tribe, from our friends, from our, and this is how we can heal that wounded child. And, this is also shows where a lot of that wound comes from. What kind of environment are we in? So if you want to know more about where this Gemini archetype is activated in your chart and in your life to better create a stronger relationship with it, contact me. This is where we will explore your natal chart and how to dive deeper into your own self-development process. So you can contact me at hello@NicoleMarie.eu or check out my website, NicoleMarie.eu. Until then, see you in the next video where we will dive into the Cancerian archetype. Speak soon.